Recording in progress.
Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the third installment of the City of Canby Budget Committee meeting, June 1st, 2023. We'll have roll call starting with
Michelle Hensley, citizen.
Jack Pendleton, citizen.
Jason Patton, City Council.
Chris Bang, City Council.
Elizabeth Chapin, Budget Committee member.
Tracy Hensley, council president.
Eric Hart, citizen. Herman Maldonado, City Council.
Scott Sassy, committee member.
Jim Davis, City Council.
Eileen Stein, interim city administrator.
Joseph Lindsay, City Attorney.
Finance Director.
Hey, Dan.
And we're going to go right into new business. Review the fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget. First up, Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund.
Is that you, Jerry?
Is that you, Jerry?
That Jerry? Is that you?
Right.
So the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund exists to provide for the future care of the Zion Memorial Park Cemetery once operational revenues from sales and activities cease. So as people purchase plots or spaces in the cemetery, a portion of those funds are set aside in this Perpetual Care Fund. You can see the beginning balance has gone up a little. We're expecting around the same amount of revenue. This fund also has the transfer over to the library at the beginning of the year, and then the library transfers the money back in January when they get their payment from the district. That's about all of it as well. Questions?
Okay, thank you.
Forfeiture fund.
I told Tro that I would do the forfeiture fund. The forfeiture fund exists to accumulate and account for assets received by the police department as a result of federal and civil drug forfeitures. So we can see that we have fund balance about the same as last year. We're expecting a little bit of revenue, both federal and civil, some interest earned on that money. Expenditures just being supplies and services for each of about 10,000, and then the reserve balance. So not a lot of activity happening in the business fund. Any questions?
Remind us, this 30,000 that's sitting there, that sits there, you carried over 19 from last year, sitting there to do what with it?
The police department can use it for certain restricted items, and I think what Troy told me was like drug enforcement things.
Okay.
And so,
Do you know if he has a plan yet? Maybe Joe knows. Does he have a plan on what, is he looking to spend this anytime soon, or?
Well, they do, when we got a drug dog, for instance, I believe there was money spent out of there. That's become more problematic, but they're looking, I think, a year from now to try to add a canine.
Canine officer.
That's only trained in drugs that are truly illegal.
Well, yeah, that is a little different now, isn't it?
Trained in.
Well, everything became legal recently.
Oh, that's right. So,
Well, we don't actually have a K-9 unit at this point in time.
Oh, okay. So that's just hanging out there waiting for.
That could be one.
Okay.
And then also, I know we've bought drones in the past, and those can be used for, drug surveillance and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay, thank you for appeasing my curiosity.
Sure.
Facilities fund.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor
Number
Friday.
one.
How is everyone? Good. So facilities, we actually did a lot of stuff last year in the facilities. We upsized a generator down at Public Works with an automatic transfer switch, so it starts up and powers everything there when the power goes out. And we just used it the other day. It works great. Right now, we're currently finishing up the drywall and insulation in the Public Works warehouses. We've never finished that, so we're excited to get that checked off the list. And upgraded the gutters and put all new keyless entry down there so that we can see who's coming and going, and it works really well. This year, some of our goals, we're trying to get a generator set, put it down here at City Hall. And we ordered it kind of in the last budget cycle, but it should be here probably a month or so. So we put a little bit of money, and I think, Eric, that's under operating contingency or something to carry over so that we can wire that thing up.
The generator at Civic Center?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, and so, and then we're upgrading LED lighting at the Public Works warehouse is one of our goals. We, going through this real quick, we'll notice that our contract services, let's start with employees. We were contracting, or we were using in-house employees to clean all the facilities in the city of Canby, and we ended up running into trouble in hiring people with all the it's hard to hire people right now. So we currently, as we just took it to the city council, are contracting that out. So you'll see where it goes from 3.5 to 1.5 employees, and so our facilities person is managing a contractor on that.
This is for janitorial.
Just for janitorial services. Then going down on contract services, you'll see it jumps up 20 grand. We took all of the generators from my sewer pump stations and all of the buildings and put them under facilities to manage it so that it's under one person, and relieve Todd and his guys up at Fleet of maintaining the generators. So we're transferring money into that to maintain all our generators, keep them all running. And then you'll see the big jump in janitorial services and supplies, and that's to pay for the custodial services. And then that's basically it with facilities. If anyone. Yes.
Councilor Barber. So Jerry or Eric, maybe you can help me understand this. So salaries and wages only went down by 60,000. The janitorial went up by 130,000. So can you tell me the difference between, so if janitorial, if that difference is 2 employees, that proposed budget on salaries and wages seems a little bit high. If we were at 184 for 3.5 employees, we're at 122 for 1.5 employees. But the difference between janitorial and wages seems much greater than.
I can't answer that like Eric can, but I do know that we calculated it out roughly, and by contracting it out, I figured we were going to save about $14,000 a year. But I don't know how it shows that on here, Eric. That's.
What I'm seeing here is that in the 23 budget, if you take the total personnel services cost of $297,025 minus what we're proposing this year at 184,746, the difference is 112,279. And the difference, so let's just say 112,000. And the difference between janitorial service, what we projected last, what was adopted for 23 last year and this year, the change is 132.
Okay.
So the difference really is $20,000 more for having the janitorial services and supplies.
Okay, so we save on some like the insurance, taxes, PERS, and that kind of stuff. So it's not a savings at all. It's still $20,000 more.
Yep.
It's just.
Why yours doesn't.
My whole page is different.
That is
That's like
that's not the right one. That's the last.
Clearly.
That's the one he gave us.
You have the same one I do. You don't have those numbers you're talking about? Yep.
Did you?
This is the book I was getting.
First week or last week?
They have the.
Did you get the new copy last week?
I didn't get a new copy.
We're working from the same version that we worked from last week.
Hers is the one before that.
Yeah, I have the old version.
Yeah, I do too.
I didn't get a new one.
I'm looking at yours.
Thank you.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
see, yeah, Jack's got, yeah, we don't have the right packet.
Yeah, well, this is from the PDF that we were sent out ahead of last week's meeting.
That should be the version that we're working.
I don't know.
I didn't bring my laptop, I asked for a hard copy so I could.
How many people need copies of what we're about to talk about?
Looks like
Jack,
Jack, you do?
Copy?
You don't have the current one, Jack.
Okay, so at least 3. So if I go get,
I'll just go do it.
if we're at the facilities, if I go get tech, sewer, wastewater, sanitary, storm.
That would be swell. Thank you.
No, I'll just go do it.
Take a recess for printing,
Yes.
Yeah.
I propose.
Happy granted.
Second.
Thank you, we'll be right back.
5-minute break.
Okay, well, maybe the mayor can show up in that time too. Probably not, it's only 6:15.
I don't think he is.
Yeah, he told me his GPS said he would be 6:30.
Recording stopped.
Hour and a half, and I just took 100 backwards.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm done.
Well, he's coming from Beaverton, I don't know where you were coming from.
I was coming from North Portland.
Oh, yeah, he was coming from Beaverton.
Welcome, Canby, we're back. Were we going into tech services next?
Were there any other questions?
Oh, that's right,
let me
Jim,
look
you had
at
a question
facilities
on
real quick.
facilities fund.
Sean, did you get your question fully answered on facilities?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
I know that we've been having meetings with the adult center and the remodel on the adult center. Did we put any money in the facilities budget in the event that we don't use ARPA funds for the adult center?
We did not. I was directed just to ask for the money through ARPA, and then I did a request through, I forget what you call James Heaps, was doing for the fund requests earlier. I requested 1.1 million for that.
From the legislature.
Legislature, yeah.
Yeah,
But
we haven't heard anything on that.
no, but
Since the
there's,
city council has not had the meeting on the ARPA funds yet. I kind of feel like we've made a commitment to the adult center for that remodel if there are the facility improvements that the city has responsibility for. So when I handle that, but I'd suggest we put something in the parking lot on that,
okay,
at least until which time the city council has a meeting and decides on that.
like the same, like 500 in case ARPA didn't work out.
Right?
Okay,
Because we're pretty much committed to the adult center
I agree.
on that facility. So the rest of the people, just, I know that Eileen and I went up and met with Kathy, and then Scott Archer and I have been meeting with Kathy at the adult center. And she's more or less been led to believe anyway that the city will come up with the funds to take care of our responsibility on the building, the exterior shell of the building. And there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done on that building. And then they in turn are gonna use their money on the inside of the building to enclose it and make it bigger and more exits and sprinklers and things like that. So that's what I'm talking about.
Councilor Tinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we know what our part of our obligation is? Do we know what that number is? And do we also, is there a reason why we think the ARPA funds aren't gonna come through? Where are we with the ARPA funds?
Well, we've got the city council still has to have a meeting on that, on the ARPA funds. And I've heard a lot of discussion, a lot of things that are in this budget that are gonna be related to the ARPA funds. Well, we're not gonna have enough money to cover all the things that people are hoping to have out of here, out of the ARPA funds.
And that's what I'm concerned about is we, by statute, have to pass this budget by the end of June, but I don't see us having this ARPA fund conversations until at least the next council meeting, which is after this budget meeting, so I'm confused how this ARPA stuff is gonna work out.
Councilor Patton.
So I think, just a second, I think how we've sort of done this in the past is with the way things are panning out, unless there's some drastic change at the city council level for the ARPA funds, I think we could look at and pass this budget as is. And then if something happens out that's catastrophic with the ARPA funds, come back and do like a budget amendment. Amend the budget or do a supplemental budget to then take money and move it around to supplement those funds that may or may not then become available for the ARPA funds.
Well, that's what I'm worried about is in the past, we haven't had the ARPA funds, so it's kind of, I feel like we're budgeting on funds we don't know we're getting, but he does have his hand up.
Eric.
We already have the ARPA money, and the ARPA money is reflected in the general fund, the beginning balance, and the unallocated ending balance.
Yeah, we just
The
haven't
ARPA
assigned,
money is already here.
yeah, we just haven't assigned the amounts yet.
That's right. The city council, we were hoping the city council would allocate the ARPA funds to the project to find.
Is it okay to do a supplemental then, like Jason's talking about?
Yeah, so if you guys were, hypothetically, if the ARPA fund meeting happens and money is like how it needs to be directed to the facilities fund, then we just do a supplemental budget from the general fund balance to the facilities fund.
Eric?
Is the adult center a city asset?
Yes.
The building is?
Yeah, city owns it.
Anybody else? Okay.
Tech services.
Hi, Paul.
Thanks from the IT side, some of the highlights on 2023. Most of the major focus was spent on upgrading our current infrastructure, auditing, services, et cetera, internet lines and whatnot. Just kind of getting things shored up. Did some upgrades for the police department servers. Got software updated to be in a supported state. And some of the big projects were conference room upgrades, the council chamber upgrade, migration to Microsoft 365. Consolidating the copier lease contracts, those should be coming up pretty soon as far as the actual implementation of that. 2023 goals, some of the focus is working on improving the security, network security for the city, further developing strategies for the Microsoft 365 implementation, being able to utilize those services a little bit more as we work that out. There's security, updating the security cameras, et cetera, across City Hall, Public Works, and Transit. The system is pretty old, and it's looking for a time to be upgraded as well to meet some newer standards and requests. Any questions about the budget?
Any questions, anybody? I just have a question out, just curiosity. What are fees and dues?
Fees and dues are a lot of the subscriptions, so basically like Microsoft 365 subscriptions would fall into that. Firewall subscriptions, our software subscriptions for managing our computers, our help desk ticketing system, et cetera. So
They really went up a lot in the last 2 years, or we just have more of them, or?
let's see.
'Cause we went from 17, 26, 61, 95.
Yeah, so a lot of that was transitioning in-house. So a lot of that was bringing the initial investment and bringing some of the services in-house, and then providing services that we didn't have previously, since we're working in-house to be able to utilize that information. So that's why you would see this year it goes back down.
Councilor Barwick.
Yeah, thank you very much, I appreciate it. My question is more for city staff, and unfortunately, I don't know if the city administrator is able to answer this question for us, but I looked through the list of things that we did, and IT was busy, and this is great. We've done a lot of awesome things this year, but I just look at the difference, right? 22, I guess, so I underline the part here is where it says, historically, the city has contracted with the third-party service provider. And I know that was more than 20 years that we provided, or had third-party. And I don't know, I asked this question last year, and I didn't get a satisfactory answer last year, I don't believe. I'm curious, for an additional $218,000, what are we getting by having IT in-house that we couldn't have gotten with a third-party provider that would have been less money? I look at the list, and while it's an extensive list, it's all things that I think a third-party provider could have handled for us. And so I guess I'm just wondering, what are we getting for an additional $218,000?
Ditto the question.
I'll take a stab. Like, during COVID, remote work became a huge thing, and There was all the work that came with getting the COVID workstations up and going. There was like investment into new equipment. There was all the Zoom stuff. There was the upgrades in this room, other conference rooms. And just like managing, getting all the new equipment in, managing vendors, managing the new software, managing the new hardware. That seems like a lot of work to me compared to pre-COVID time.
Right. But we had our third-party contractor through most of COVID until the end of 2022. So the third-party contractor handled a lot of that work that you say. So again, my question is, what are we getting now for $218,000 more that we didn't get before?
Anecdotally, like the service I'm getting from IT is exceptional, but I mean, that's just my experience. I can't answer for you.
Is Danny here to answer these questions?
So I guess that's a question maybe for the parking lot, but I really don't feel like I got my question answered last year when I asked that, and I don't feel like I'm getting an answer this year. I get it, right? Last year, the answer was more control. I don't know that more control is worth $218,000. So.
Anecdotally, again, I just know for me, I had no downtime this year, which I can't say what's happening before.
Right. And but with all due respect, you didn't necessarily work with the IT contractor that we had.
Not for very long.
For very long. So again, I really want to start thinking about these types of things when we start bringing historic services and we start bringing those in-house versus outside. What do we get in addition? If we're going to spend another $218,000, that's fine. But what do we get for it? I want to know what we get for it. If the answer is we have more control over them, I don't know that that's worth $218,000 to me. Maybe it is, but I really want some meat to chew on for $218,000. So I think
If you will, I can speak a little bit to that. This is a no reflection on prior experience. It's just kind of the nature of the industry, I guess you could say. So one of the comments that you made was there was a lot of work that was done, all the upgrades that were done. And then you said that could have been done previously by the previous contractor. It doesn't matter who the contractor is. It's a contractor, it's called a managed service provider, which is what the contract had before, is basically, it's in the industry. I used to actually manage a service provider before I started here. So I understand the contracts and how those work. And the general idea of how they work is they're a break-fix industry mentality. Is things break, we fix it, we keep it going. It's a maintenance contract. We just keep things running. So in a sense, when in that contract, additional services, so on top of we keep you running, we do the basic things like that. If you have additional things you want done, you're gonna upgrade major systems, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. Those are additional costs. Those are not included in the contract. So when you have additional projects, those are additional bids that they quote you and add on top. So what you see in the original contract is sort of like the basic package. So when you look at the cost, unless you count in the total, it's considered the total cost of ownership of the contract. If you were to utilize more of those services outside to do a major upgrade for Microsoft 365 or to do a major upgrade on servers, et cetera, those are generally additional costs that you get quoted for on top of that contract. So I would say that internal versus external, 100% focused on not just keeping things running, but what is the strategic planning going forward? What are additional value services that the city can provide to its citizens and internal customers? And that is the difference between a managed service provider who is charging for a block of hours to provide services for any company versus an internal department that is completely dedicated not only 24/7 to providing support, but also providing additional strategic planning. Strategic planning doesn't come with managed service providers. They're not thinking 100% 24/7. What are we doing to make things better within the city? Our job is to keep things going, to keep things running. And so keeping things running isn't necessarily keeping things 100%. So all of the work that was done last year, you say it could have been done by the previous, then why wasn't it? Why did it take us this year to do all that work to get that up to speed? That's the difference between an internal department and an external contractor their job is to keep things running. So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, and
Whoa, just a second. I've had my hand up, I've
still
been
my
waiting
question.
patiently.
We're still on my question, Jason. Still on my question. So I appreciate that. That's a great explanation, I really do. I guess I want to know, are we going to be doing $200,000 annually in continued upgrades? So that makes sense. We would have had to spend, if we were going to do all of those with a contract, we would have had to spend more money. I get that. Yeah, totally get that. That makes total sense. But are we doing that every single year? Because this additional 218,000 is this year, and then next year it's probably going to be 270,000, and it's going to continue going up because costs continue to go up, right? So are we going to be doing an additional $200,000+ in upgrades every single year to make up the difference?
Counselor Patton.
So I have a procedural question. I know that this body is going to make a recommendation to city council that this is the budget that we are proposing that they review and then approve. Is this body allowed to make other recommendations, put forward other recommendations to city council for their consideration as well,
Well, you could,
other than the budget?
well, it's supposed to be the budget.
Or if it's budget related?
Well, if it's budget related, I would say you could advise, it's advisory, right? So you could advise them to look at IT in particular or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I would like to propose, and I know that this is a wound that the scab has been picked at for a couple of years. And I think there's been talk of this as of considering this, but make it formal, that for this next year, there be a formal review of what the true cost of bringing the services in-house is compared to what that cost would be for a contract service to do it, and how that would compare. And if there is cost savings and what that is. And send that up to city council for their review to then come back at a later date for consideration. Does that make sense?
I would also mention, if this is a big shift, or would be a big shift, right? It can't happen overnight. You know what I mean? So there would be a transition into a contractor anyway.
Yeah, so this.
So I mean, you see what I'm saying? This committee wouldn't be making a decision to.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But it's essentially saying, this is what we're sort of locked into for this next year. But after reviewing the budget and with the questions that are happening at this level, that this body send a flag up to the council to say, for next year, we need to do a real cost comparison on this so that we can truly answer the question, does it make more sense to have this in-house or contract out?
Well,
is what I'm getting at.
What the other avenue is, if the budget committee can, stomach what's in front of it, the council can always order their employees to do just that, on their own. If it helps the good of the order feel like you're getting some of your input towards what
That's
is
what
an
I'm trying to get at.
administrative decision to begin with.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
So the council would tell its administrator to make, or to look at its administrative decisions.
Yes.
So if that.
Would
if
that-
answers that.
Would that please the group as far as trying to get a definitive answer to some of these questions for next time we sit down and look at this?
That's for me.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it seems like it's working really well now, and the city council is not the people who have to deal with all the computers and stuff, So why would we change it if it works okay?
Well, I think that is more of a policy thing that the city council would direct to look into further. That is not clearly the question exists at this level amongst members of this body, whether that is whether this is a good spend of money or not.
Right.
It's not for us to direct Eileen or any other city staff to do that, but I'm trying to put some sort of, something on the record for this body, for those that have a question about this, that question will be elevated to council for us to have a conversation at that level, and then direct city staff to make that change. I think sometimes over the years, this body, as a former citizen member of this body, there are sometimes questions and concerns that are raised here that die here and never make it to council. This year, I want to see some decisions that this group has made be followed through up to the council level to see some action on it. That's my goal in this.
Liz, it'd be like if I do your house for $225 a month and another gentleman can come do it for $150, who are you gonna take?
I don't know.
Same quality, same quality. Now, I'm not saying it could
I
be.
like talking to you about the city crap
You're rare.
when you come over.
Eric and then Jim.
Okay, so there's a couple things. First, this kind of ties back to what I said on opening night, which was, it's really interesting how we're picking and choosing what departments have to prove the work they've done and which ones aren't. But in this case, this is the longest list of any department that's come forward. And I don't know a ton about IT, but I know enough to see that it looks like there was some serious security or risk that we were exposed to. Maybe that was a lacking by the previous vendor, and part of the reason we brought it in-house. There's a lot here, old servers, old software, we're talking, city infrastructure that could have been shut down very easily by someone with basic computer skills, and that wasn't being updated. So it sounds to me like they weren't doing their job, but aside here or there with that, I just wondered too, I remember last year when we talked about this, I thought that there was also one or more city councilors that had some involvement with that contractor too. And I don't know if that's still the case, but I'm really curious as why it seems like it's very obvious, like the work that's been done and the improvements have been done, but why we want to change it back. I guess I don't understand that, but just voicing that.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you. The fire district utilizes a private contractor for our service. To do the exact same service, we'd be spending about the same amount of money that the city's spending, and we'd have to increase our budget. They take care of all of our MDCs on all of the fire units. It's how you write the IGA or the expectation for the professional services. We are not charged additional because of the way that we write our contract with a private contractor. There's no way that the fire district would be able to afford to do our own independent IT department. For quite a few computers, a lot of MDC on fire apparatus and things like that. It's how you write the contract, and you also involve them in the planning for what the improvements are that you need as well, And so we've been extremely happy with the private contractor, which the city used to use as well. And they've been doing a wonderful job for us. Security issues are not a security issue. They continue to upgrade our security, and that sometimes can be gruesome in regards to having to, follow all their programs to deal with the upgrades of security and things like that. So that leads me to looking at the parking lot, because of the fact that the old city council made a rapid change last time in regards to IT. They made that happen very, very quickly. And when we look at the parking lot, we've got a lot of things in the parking lot that we need to make some decisions on. So when we look at cost savings, is this a cost savings? Potentially, it may still stick at the higher priority for us. But I think we also have to identify that amount in the event that we want to do something else that provides better service to the citizens.
Eric, did you want to respond to that?
I just wanted to talk about the numbers really quick. someone mentioned that the difference was over 200,000, but if we look at the 22 actuals and add up the personnel services, materials and services, and capital outlay, that number comes to 425,761. And if we look at the 23 actuals, the projected, and we add up the personnel services, material services, and capital outlay, we get to 548,229. So the difference is really just 122,468.
Which is a lot of money.
It is. And then looking at the proposed FY24, there's same three categories. The increase is 56,463 over this year.
Michelle?
And maybe this is already covered, but I'm just curious, why are we having the revenue for tech services go down so significantly?
Because their requirement, because we budgeted last year that it was gonna cost us 822,000, but it came in much lower. The cost of the IT department did.
The
So
revenue?
no, the expenditures.
Revenue.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
So we budgeted like a lot of expenditures last year, but the actual expenditures came in much lower. So the savings we're realizing goes to the beginning fund balance for this year, which lowers how much we need all the other departments to fund IT.
Counselor Hensley?
Thank you. So you said that the costs for this year are 56, I think you said, more than last time?
Yes.
So that brings us right back around to Counselor Farwig's question of, are we expecting to have 200 and some odd thousand, or are we expecting to increase our upgrades and updates to services in every year? Or why are we going to continue down this path? If we've upgraded everything, it seems like, to me, we could go back to a maintenance contract.
I mean, I can't answer that directly, Paul can, but my understanding is looking at the 24 goals is that there's still upgrades to be done next year. There's like the MS 365 team strategy. It says develop and implement, so it means like more software stuff. I'm sorry, Paul.
Well, there's still more, there's upgrades for conference rooms, there are more upgrades, we're still running over. There's backup and data solutions that still need to be upgraded. There's the security system that needs to be upgraded across multiple systems. And it's not like it's upgrades and so forth, they're never a one and done. It's not like, oh, we upgraded everything and now we could just coast. So when you coast, you end up back with bubblegum and baling wire, okay? So if you want a strategy of your city running, let's upgrade and then let it go, just let it go for 10 years and then have to redump a whole bunch of money into it again and then let it go. I mean, that's a strategy, you could follow that, or you could really stay on top of it. And the thing is too, is providing, the whole point of this, of working to get everything up and going now is you don't want your IT department spending the majority of their time keeping things running. You want your IT department innovating and providing more services, newer services, more value to your community. If you're spending your time just keeping things running, then you're not providing the additional value to your community that you need. So there's two different methodologies. You can spend the time just keeping things running. So that was our goal, is this year was to get everything up to speed so that we could spend migrating to cloud services. You can migrate to cloud services, you don't have to have somebody in a chair manually keeping the wheel going, right? So you can offset that. Okay, now we can be focused on who we're gonna implement, our businesses can now, in the future, you can go online, you can submit your cat tax, right? Right now, I'm still filling out the piece of paper, typing it up on the calculator, writing a check and mailing it into the city or bringing it in. It would be great if our businesses could go online, fill out their form, electronically submit their payment, and then finance doesn't have to take all those pieces of paper, copy all the information down, take all those checks, and process them and put them into the system. So those are the additional value that we could be focusing on doing that instead of keeping the hamster wheel running. And so those are the differences in that philosophy.
Okay, well, I don't know if Counselor Patton was making an official motion. If he is, I'll second it, that we would have City Council talk about potentially having the administrator look at comparisons.
Waving my pen just a little. I know, I'm getting there. Okay.
I was following up on what was already, it was like Counselor Rowett, it was my question.
Mayor Hodson and then Jen. So, Paul, thank you for your service. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming in and pinch hitting tonight, and taking the arrows on this topic. And back to your earlier comment, hopefully we use Bubblicious or Hubba Bubba or Bazooka Gum to fix things. One of my questions I have is, when we look at the old system that came out and we put in the new, and looking at what we have coming up, because Eileen and I have had this conversation about, there's a lot of tech pieces that are coming on board for the city, and the biggest one right now is the body cams and the dash cams and the amount of bandwidth that they're gonna take up and storage that they're gonna take up. Did the previous system that we had in place, was that significant enough to be able to handle the addition of what is coming aboard? That's number one.
The answer would be no.
Okay.
But the good thing is that information isn't actually being stored by the city. That the comment of offboarding to cloud services, all of that information is now being stored in
Elsewhere.
the cloud.
Okay.
Right? So we don't have to try to back that up. We don't have to store it here locally.
Okay, that's good.
And the great thing is when we move to because we're doing that with the body cams. Currently, we're still doing that with the police, the vehicle cameras.
Right.
But once that switches over to the new Axon system, then that information will then go onto the cloud as well. We don't have to try to manage that terabytes of data that we're backing up and maintaining.
Well, in terms of cybersecurity, where are we positioned now compared to where we were?
Right now, we have the migration to Microsoft 365. We now have the multi-factor authentication for external access to our emails, et cetera, which we didn't have before. It's just the way the old email server was set up, just the way the system was. So we have that. The part of the CIS for the insurance, or the liability insurance. So one of their things is multi-factor authentication. It is just all systems in general, all cities, we're moving to that. So implementing that for not only for our phones and for external access for 365, even our local servers will be switching over to being able to log in and you have to have multi-factor authentication to log into the servers, et cetera.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate that. To Councilor Patton's comment, I'm kind of with Councilor Patton on, here's the budget. We can't create a gap, right? We can't just turn off current IT services and then bring on somebody new. It just doesn't work that way. We didn't even do that when we switched from our contractor to having it in-house. So I think the council does, if that's the case, then I think the council should, take a look at it, or put out, go out and ask for, an RFP process to see what that looks like and see, is it apples to apples or is it apples to oranges? Because right now, we could pull all the money out of this piece, but then where does that leave us? It leaves us in a tough situation. So I would back Councilor Patton's comments on that as well. Jack, Chris.
Yeah, I have some questions about security. I understand that Oregon City was hit last week with a cybersecurity attack. You're talking about multi-factor identification on the user side. What are we out on the internet side? How do we keep them out of here?
That is the internet side.
I don't know, what kind of protection do we have on that?
So we have the multi-factor authentication for accessing our email and et cetera, logging in from there. And then also from the email side, as far as, the security of the incoming email, scanning, looking for phishing scams, antiviruses, et cetera. So we have that is in place, protecting that as well.
Ransomware sometimes doesn't come in that way.
So I guess I would like to have a more specific idea of what you're referring to.
People that are coming into your operating system and that kind of thing, coming in various open back doors.
About like your firewalls and so forth?
Yeah, we're,
So, yeah, we have.
because I just want to make sure that is in the budget, so that if we need more of that, we need to be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, so we upgraded, our firewalls were upgraded this year. We have the latest software and updates on the firewalls.
Okay.
And the services running on the firewalls. When you get a firewall, it's not just plug it in. There's actually subscriptions, and those firewalls use analytics and heuristics that manage the traffic coming in and out and analyze it, et cetera. So.
Correct.
Counselor Patton, and then.
Well, Chris has actually had his hand raised a couple times, so I'll go to him and then to me.
Counselor Banks?
I have a couple of comments. Number one, the whole council's here. I don't think it requires a vote to urge the council to do something. It's mostly just councilors pushing it. If we want to do something in a council meeting, we can do that. We don't need to take time from the budget committee for that. I also want to point out that discussing future budget years is really beyond the purview of this budget discussion. We're here to discuss tonight's budget. If the council wants to change its IT service, this isn't the forum for that.
Yeah, my comment goes along with that. We are now broaching into policy decisions, and that is not the purview of this group. We can review these numbers, we can compel the city council to look into things further, but we, as far as I know, and over a decade that I've been on this committee, we cannot just make a decision tonight to completely wipe out an entire department and put in a contract. That is not in our purview. So I'm not sure how much more time you want to spend on this. I will send it off to Counselor Varwick.
No, I was just gonna kind of echo what the mayor was saying and Jason's comment of having the council look at it. I think it's a good idea. The first question I asked was, what did we get? And I just wanted to make the statement that Paul, you did a fantastic job of describing that. And that's what I was looking for last year. That's what I was looking for this year. And I just want to say thank you for really describing that, because I now see while we probably do still have to have some discussions about it, I do see the value.
Okay, are we done? Okay, Counselor Banks.
Just a point of order question. It occurred to me, and maybe my packet's gummed up, but we skipped the fleet.
Did that last week.
Did that last week.
Did we do that? Oh,
Yeah, we jumped to that last week because Paul was down here, right?
okay, that's right. Okay. yeah.
Tom, sorry.
No, I remember that too.
I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
We're good. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, everyone.
I'll make up for my transgression later.
This is one syllable name.
What? Most likely, most likely.
We are down to the sewer combined fund, so I presume it's Jerry again.
Someone took your seat, I know.
My name tag is here. He was
Gary no
junior,
lean on this?
he was junior mayor while you were gone.
Yeah, he was mayor for a day.
Sewer line fund, wastewater treatment plant. You start with that, I guess.
You're starting on page 99.
Yeah, 98 and 99.
Okay.
Or 97 or.
Mine-
Oh,
In the new packet, it would be, starting on page 97.
That's what I thought, 97.
So,
Sewer combined fund resources.
Yes.
Yeah, 97.
so that's gonna have to be the enterprise fund, is that?
That's the combined.
The sewer combined is just combining wastewater treatment, collections, stormwater, and the non-departmental, all just in one summarized thing right here, so.
Okay.
It's showing all the revenue resources coming in, the beginning fund balance, the transfers expected, and then at the bottom is the requirements, just for personnel services, material services, capital outlay for each one of the different departments in the sewer combined fund. So If we just move to page 98, then Jerry could hit the details of the wastewater treatment plant. And we'll be going through all the stuff that's on this summary page.
Thanks, Eric. So, wastewater treatment plant, we actually doing a lot of stuff there this year, and you'll notice when we go to the next one with collections, we're not doing as much. We kind of just go back and forth with that, so we keep that, so we don't overload what we spend on that. So, basically, we did, we put in a new clarifier, added a clarifier and stuff, and I'm learning a lot about the wastewater treatment plant. I've just been overseeing it now for a year and a half or so, and so I'm learning a lot from them guys, and it's pretty interesting. But the new clarifier they put in has helped a lot, especially it's gonna allow us to do a lot more cleaning during, we have certain months where we can clean the storm line, or sewer lines, so without affecting the plant. Some of the projects that we are budgeting for this year, we're putting in a new building so that we can, some of our equipment's been sitting outside and we got an area that we can put it in over there. The vehicles and equipment is just a capital, and it's for if we have pumps or anything like that that break down during the year, we have funding in there for capital to replace those, which can be quite expensive. The improvements is, we're updating the press head basin, and it's basically just recoating it and sloping it so that there's less shoveling in there, which I think you guys can understand. It all slopes and slick, and it's easier to slide all the good stuff to the middle and clean up easier. And just update that, it's an old basin. And then we're upgrading the UV and generator power down there. So we're doing a bunch of upgrades to that, and the fuel station, 200,000 that we're gonna contribute to that for the, in case of another emergency where we need fuel to keep our generators running. But other than that, nothing fancy, just doing some upgrades down there, and I always encourage you guys, if you want to come down and do a tour, the guys love showing it off.
Been there, done that,
I think-
I'm good.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah, it was so lovely.
It's lovely.
So any questions?
Well, the water doesn't stink anymore. Is that what this is?
No.
Oh, the water, no, this is the other end. of
Not the
that.
drinking water.
This is the part that does stink.
Oh,
Yes,
Wastewater.
wastewater.
They can make this not stink, that's some real good work over there.
Yes. Yeah.
It actually did stink at my house.
Is this where we talk about the dryer?
The poop dryer again?
No, I was hoping you guys had forgotten about that.
No, we're not
How
gonna
can we
worry about that.
forget?
Yeah, I mean, when you can make a forklift smell like it, that's impressive, but.
Counselor Davis.
Burning it is a good idea, but.
Jerry, the fuel station, was that in this year's budget?
It was, we actually budgeted $500,000 in this year's budget. We've started it, we've spent money on it, but not the full amount. We're still in the design and planning stage of it, so we're rolling that money. It ended up coming to $1 million to do this, so we're hoping to get started on that. Right now, it's in the planning stage. Once it's done with planning, we're gonna, July 1, start on the fuel station, put it out for bid.
Thank
So,
you.
yep. We hope to have that actually done this year. Yeah, because we need it.
Anybody else? Okay.
Collections, page 100 and 101. Nothing big in collections this year. We're kind of just doing stuff at wastewater. We have a few projects going though that we're trying to finish up. We try to clean 10 miles of line a year. We were a little under this year just because they were doing them improvements at wastewater. We didn't want to affect their plant while they were down. Right now, we're in the middle of removing the Safeway pump station and gravitating the line and getting it across 99 before they pave 99. So everyone's pretty excited about that, getting it out from the backside of Safeway pump station. But the only capital we really have is the fuel station for that, their portion of that. So we have a really, really nice collection system.
Questions? Moving on. Stormwater.
Page 102 and 103. Everything's doing good in stormwater. We're actually keeping up on our sweeping, so it's saved us on maintenance for cleaning catch basins and dry wells. We cleaned 4 dry wells this year. We've mapped 2% of the city storm system. We're trying to get that up to increased to 50%. And I know our interim city administrator showed kind of an interest in that, which I'm excited. GIS is something that I want to get off the ground and going, and we got a good start on it. We've done just a lot more preventative maintenance with stormwater. Far as that, no new employees, nothing out of the ordinary change. We, under capital, we put 194,000 in there for we've been trying to buy a service truck all year, and they're just saying, we can't even get on the list. So we put that in there, the 194, just to cover it, to see if there's a chance we can get one in this budget cycle, because our other one's I think it's a 1996. And it's a Ford, and it's got a 460. It still runs every day, but the doors and stuff are starting to fall off of it. But we're hoping we can get, maybe use that, just have a placeholder, that money there. And then 80,000 for capital, we're throwing that in there just because flooding areas pop up throughout the year, and being able to have that funding in case we need to throw a couple dry wells in is handy. I don't know if you guys saw, we just installed 2 from last year's budget, one over on Juniper and one over on 22nd. Just got completed today.
Jerry, real quick.
Yes.
On the 194,000 that you have in there proposed for the equipment, I see at our 23 projected, it was the same number. Did we spend 194,000 in 23?
No, we did not.
So that projected number should be 0, not 194.
Let me make sure
It shouldn't be 0. Like the capital stuff that was in that 194 was 100,000 for the fuel station, and then facilities had those 5 projects.
Yeah.
The gutter replacement, the insulation, the HVAC system, the keyless entry, that were going done by collections, but then once the project's done, the costs get allocated to a few different departments, so that's what was in there.
Okay.
Obviously, the 100,000 wasn't spent on the fuel station, and those other projects are still ongoing.
Okay.
We're hoping that covers the truck if we can get it. It might be another 100, who knows how much it's gonna go up.
Sure, yeah. I just wanted to make sure if that number was right, if the actual projected, so thank you for that explanation.
Okay. Sewer fund, not a lot.
So, the non-allocated, the personnel services in here is actually, the person I have in the finance department that does utility billing, her costs that can be directly attributed to working for the sewer fund. That's what these numbers are. The sewer billing is, I'm not gonna answer that because I don't know the exact answer. And the franchise fee, I don't know what the franchise fees are. But that would be a franchise fee we're paying to someone. Do you have any idea?
It's probably the general fund.
Yeah, that was brought up by, I think, Jack.
That's the 7%.
Yeah.
That was started with,
Gotcha.
which I had a really good conversation with Eileen about it, and I don't know if she filled you in on that, Eric, but
It's in the parking lot list.
Okay, we can back to that.
And then there's the transfers out, which those are all the transfers to cover the overhead in the general fund that you see there. And then just a $154,000 contingency and reserve for future expenditure balance. And that's about it.
Questions? So when we look at the future expenditure piece, Jerry, like what falls in that category that we're carrying over 10 mil?
What reserve for future expenditure?
Yeah, like what are we looking at that falls in that category?
Like, do you mean what kind of projects?
Yeah.
I don't know, but Jack brought that up about how it's really important that we should be tracking all the capital projects and that's what we need to be tracking capital projects for.
And then, Mayor Hodson, a lot of these projects we're doing, like in streets and stuff, are affected by this. So like, we'll have, if there was a future project that we had to extend a sewer main and do stuff like that, or, you know, you pull on that street, when that won't, I mean, that's been allocated on this, but that money, say we ended up going over budget and we needed to have some extra money for sewer, just happening, or if we had to upgrade the Three Sisters property, DEQ made requirements to do water cooling or something like that for wastewater, we would have that money to, we wouldn't have to borrow it.
Okay. That's what I'm driving at.
I think you like having a big savings account, don't you?
Well, we're gonna have to borrow too much.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I just want to say that on the summary page is the only place that the revenue shows up for the sewer combined fund. So if anyone had any questions on the summary page, which is 97, the resource section at the top half of the chart, if you guys have any questions about that, happy to answer. One thing I would point out is that the amount of interest revenue coming into the sewer department is substantially more than normal because the fund, the balance in the LGIP account is really huge. So the city's earning a lot of interest every month. That's why that interest is so much.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks, Jerry. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So really quickly with that, this is kind of backing up a couple of funds. With the cemetery perpetual care money, is that also invested in that pool in order to raise more money to put into that bank account?
Yes, so
Okay.
all of the funds that have reserved balances or whatever that are in here, that money really sits in the LGIP account. We have like a checking account and a payroll account and a utility lockbox account. But the vast majority of cash is sitting in that LGIP account. It earns interest, and so every month we look at how much interest is earned, then we look at the cash balances in all of these accounts and then allocate the interest across the accounts.
Great. I had to ask something about the cemetery.
Thank you, Jerry.
Mr. Parker's eyes are rolling, I can tell.
I doubt it. He's enjoying himself in Germany right now.
Do we want to take a quick break before doing the parking lot? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Recording stopped.
Committee discussion of the parking lot list.
So, Chair Sassy, I would just want to indicate that you, first of all, you should have two memos at your places. One is dated May 25th, and the other one is dated May 31st. So those are the kind of the cumulative questions that you've asked to date and staff responses to them. So I can walk through each of these memos, or if you have questions on them, I can just take your questions on them. So it's your.
Jeff?
Yeah. This is on page 3 of the first memo. The last one, city reserves. When I look over at page 39, I'm questioning why general fund, transit fund, a bunch of them, some of them streets fund, facilities, fleet, tech, all of these, the ending balance is substantially lower than the beginning balance. And in the past, it seems like we have tried to more or less have the same amount coming out as going in. Are we spending more than we should be? Just as a philosophical question here, we're drawing down reserves. And I can remember, it was quite a while ago, we've had some fairly heated discussions about reserves, about not letting them dip too low. So are we drawing down too much?
So you're looking at page 39.
39, yeah, and I'm looking at the beginning fund balance and well, now we call it reserve for future use, what used to be ending balance.
Just noticing the difference between
The ending is a lot lower than the beginning on quite a number of these, very significantly lower than the beginning on quite a few of those funds. Are we overspending our means here?
Well, let's look at the general fund for one. The beginning fund balance there is like 7.9 million, right? And then the reserve for future expenditure line is like almost 4.6 million. So the difference there is that the Parks Department is requesting $3.5 million in investment in capital assets, right? So that's like one big ask that's kind of out of the ordinary, a $3.5 million capital expenditure. So that's a good, indicator, the difference between 8 million and 4.6, 3.5 million going to capital expenditure. So I can't really answer whether that's good or bad, but that's the main reason why that number is different.
Okay, well, what about the other 2.5 million in there then? I look at a lot of these funds and I look at them and the capital outlay is substantially higher than what we could put in there from SDCs because the SDCs are restricted.
Absolutely.
Where they come from. So I'm just wondering, do we feel this is something that we can sustain maybe more for next year than this year? Do we feel this is something we can sustain? I know right now, I guess one of my concerns is we've been living off the ARPA COVID gravy train a little bit of late.
There has been I think, a mentality to invest in capital projects with the ARPA fund, but I don't think that's a bad thing, right? And you could definitely control the difference between the beginning fund balance and the reserve for future expenditure, just in the general fund, if you looked at the capital outlay. I looked at the Parks Department, and maybe it even shows here. Give me 1 second to get to the Parks. Okay, the Parks Department's on page 70. And in fiscal year 21, there there was only $336,000 spent on capital projects. Wait. You see the capital outlay section at the bottom for parks?
Yeah,
So in
2.1 and now it's up to 4.3, so about 2 million, below, about 2.2 million of parks.
Well, even go back even further to the first column, which is the FY '21 actual, and the capital outlay then was only 336,000.
Okay,
The next year, it's like 400,000. Then last year was budgeted at 2.1 million, and this year is at 3.5. So those over $2 million expenditures seem like out of the ordinary to me, like one-time investments in the community. I don't know, I mean, I could look up at the data, but I don't have the data in front of me for like how much the Parks Department was spending on capital outlay before COVID. So I don't know if it was like $1 million a year or like 500,000.
I don't think it was anywhere near as much as it is here.
Right.
Yeah.
So to me, the dip in the general fund balances is due to the investment in capital projects for parks.
Hi, Eric. We also finished the master plan. Master plan and are able to access the SDC funds now too.
Okay. Let's look at one of the other ones that, so streets is kind of similar, back on page 39, Jack.
Yeah.
The streets department has like a $7.3 million beginning balance and an ending balance of about 4.9, but their capital outlay is 8 million.
Yes, I know they have a lot.
On the transit side of things, it's not actually different, it's just laid out differently. The actual carryover is the same. The difference on the transit and the fleet side is the way Eric has laid out the future expenditures. We didn't really have that line item before, the way it's laid out, plus you have the building. It's actually, if you looked at transit and you did the math from last year, this year, you won't actually see it's really that different at all. I carry over a lot of money because I got a building going. I also have a lot of grants that only allow me to spend certain ways, so they carry over from time to time. And as I spend them, then they go away from that. But a lot of times they get carried over. So you won't see a huge difference, even though it looks different because of the way it's laid out. But the actual change isn't that different. Same thing with fleets. It's more of a way Eric lays it out versus actual numbers shifting significantly. But you're always on the transit side gonna see a shift because grants can only be spent for specific things, and if I can't spend them in 1 year, I have to carry them over, then I spend them the next year, they disappear.
Right.
So it's gonna shift up and down in that case.
And, you know, and the SDC fund is another one where it's, you can just look at the capital outlay or the transfer out in SDC is really paying for capital projects. And, you know, this year we're projecting spending 8.6 million out of the SDC funds to fund the capital projects, so.
Well,
Councilor Pan.
I think something to keep in mind is, you know, we talk about these reserves and wanting to have a healthy reserve. And correct me if I'm wrong, but here on that same page at the bottom, it talks about all the ending fund balances and stuff, and it shows that our projected reserve for 2020, at the end of 2023 is 55%.
Yes.
And even after all of our expenditures for this budget, using those ARPA funds that are in that reserve and all that, our reserves are still at 28%. The council's goal is 30 to 40%. And if it dips below that, to start looking at ways to conserve. But keep in mind, for like state recommendations, they only recommend 12%. And on the high end, a 25% reserve. So we still have healthy reserves. And even in the dark days when I was on council and there was like no money coming in because of the housing crisis, we spent into reserves, but there was no point in time where we were worried about things like bankruptcy of the city. So I personally don't see a problem with the reserves that the city has moving into the next fiscal year.
Counselor Banks.
I see the opposite. I see that we tuck away too much money. I don't know why we have such a high ending fund balance exceeding what the state recommends. I think it's a shame that we tax our citizens and put the money in the bank. If we're gonna tax people, we should probably provide services commensurate with that tax rate. So I'm totally comfortable with 28% and actually uncomfortable because it's so high.
So isn't anybody like curious, like we budgeted and it was 30%, but if we're projected to hit 55, like we have a proposed budget of 28.
The reason for that is because in the 23 budget, there was like, I don't know what the total number for capital projects were that were approved, but we didn't get anywhere near spending all the money that wanted to be spent on capital projects, right? So that unspent money ends up with the 23 projected reserve balance at 55%.
Anything else? Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Counselor Barber.
Yeah, I don't have any questions on the parking lot, but I want to make sure that I say that good job to city staff and to this committee who put in the work to make this budget happen. I know that the last few weeks have had a lot of questions, and some of them have have been tense, right? And so I just appreciate all the work that's gone into the budget by city staff and by this budget committee, so I just wanted to make sure I publicly said that.
Counselor Patton.
Yeah, so one of the things that was brought up, and I just wanted to, as far as one of the items that was mentioned in the parking lot, Counselor Davis had mentioned something about reducing the mayor and council line from taking out the $5,000 increase. I think in the past, the city council has sort of been running pretty lean as far as being able to participate in the various things that put the city of Canby in the face of other cities around the area and in the state. And I would advocate for leaving that in. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna spend that $5,000, but at least it's there, so if someone needs to make a trip to a conference or something like that, that those funds are available, and if we don't spend them, then the money just sits in reserve. So that is my push. And any discussion on that?
Mr. Chair,
Counselor.
I think that was my question, and I agree with you.
Oh, okay.
I think it got misunderstood, lost in translation here.
Okay.
I didn't necessarily want the 5,000 taken back out.
Oh, okay.
I just felt like maybe it was into the wrong line item, because it was like training and travel. I just wanted to make sure it
I
was.
thought you had asked about reducing it. I must have been dreaming that
Well,
day, I apologize.
Or did you ask about reducing it? Oh, okay. Yeah,
Huh.
I didn't want it reduced necessarily, I just felt like maybe the line items were messed up, and that's what I was asking about, to make sure it was
Okay.
travel and training were appropriately
Well, I'm sorry for saying you did it, my bad.
Yeah, I think the 17,000 is appropriate, because I think there will, you talk about the amount of training needed and those, and a lot of us didn't go to some of the conferences, county, the county dinners and things like that, that come off that line, and I think that it's important to have.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that travel and training were appropriately distributed. I didn't know if they were, that was my question. So, thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
I don't want to take it out either.
No, okay, good.
Counselor Davis.
I just had a question around the emergency management. I know that we've been waiting for that to occur. And is that in this year's budget, or are we taking it into next year's budget? For the emergency management plan?
Yeah, I had something about that as well.
What I know is that it was in last year's budget and it wasn't spent. And it is a request in the ARPA presentation. And that 100,000 doesn't appear in this budget.
Was it, Eric, was it budgeted under general budget this year then? And it's been moved to 100,000 in next year's under ARPA?
Yeah, so last year it was in, let's see.
I think I have it. Under the administrative, page 54, under professional tech services, there was a line for 108,500. I believe that's the line.
So it's actually on the first page of the first memo.
Right.
At the bottom talks about it, right? So in the FY '23 budget, it was in the admin department under professional and tech services, but the 100,000 was never spent. There was no emergency plan done, right? And then for this year, I did not put it back in there for the simple reason that it's on the ARPA presentation as a request for using ARPA funds on it. And I was really hesitant to put any ARPA funded projects in the budget, yeah, before council allocates the ARPA money.
Just kind of a heads up, you know, again, this is another one that's gone to the council yet, and hopefully the council will support the emergency management plan. Let's remember where we were at the time that the city administrator was recommending we update our emergency operations plan. It needs to be done very badly, very, very badly. So as long as we can get that done this next fiscal year, it needs to be done.
And to piggyback on that, so you're saying that out of this budget, the $100,000 has been pulled out. And so we're, if the ARPA funds go through, there's just $100,000. And any overage would then be covered from the general fund or whatever.
Say that again?
So in this budget, we're not carrying that $100,000 over to this year because it wasn't spent last year. We're pulling it completely out.
No, it carried over.
Okay, so technically, if the council does the ARPA funds, there would be $200,000 for the emergency management plan.
The ARPA money is already in the budget. There's no ARPA money sitting somewhere else that gets added to this budget.
Okay, so it's
already
just
in.
$100,000.
Yes.
Okay, that, I was wondering if there was extra, if this was gonna make 200, okay, that clarifies it for me, thank you.
Any other questions on the May 25th parking lot memo?
I do have one question. Is Canby Kids donation, is that a done deal, or can we give them anything? I know, Jamie, we talked about the grant, and we need to get with Chantel on that to help with that, but I know we were asking for maybe 15 grand, if we could even give them anything would help.
Eric, we put that in there, didn't we?
No. When we had the meeting, I asked if people wanted to put it in, and it was put on the parking lot. So it's not in this budget, but if people want to donate money, I don't know what the method is here, to get it approved, but if it's approved, there's money in the general fund to give Canby Kids. It's not an issue.
I'd like to just get that back on the, I'm not saying we have to give them 15 grand every year, but as long as we're building houses and adding industry, I'd like to see them get a little cut.
I don't know if that needs to be like, or what, but.
Like,
Yeah, there needs to be like a general consensus, a majority vote, I would think.
I guess my concern of just saying we're gonna give Canby Kids a check is that if we do that, there's a lot of other organizations in the community that would like money, and now we're favoring one over the other without creating a process. I think what might be a good idea is to recommend, I know last time there was a discussion about, is there some modifications that can be made to the grant fund where the Canby Kids could apply for a larger amount? And so I'm thinking maybe that is a better discussion to send up to council as a policy thing, to say, is there a way we can modify that program so they can have access to it as well as others, or creating a different program that would allow larger grants for an organization like that.
I just want to get it out there so it's in everybody's mind again,
Yeah.
so.
If I could make a suggestion, one thing we might be able to do is add a line in the budget that's like a donation to the community line. That's not program specific, but we could add it in here with a dollar amount. And then the council at a future date could like take applications or whatever, and then distribute the money. We don't have to determine who gets the money in this meeting, but we could do a line and an amount there.
Be more of a first come, first served basis on applications.
It's very common for
Yeah.
many cities to have a community grant program. So,
Counselor Davis and then Counselor Banks.
I was gonna ask Mayor Tracy, who's been on council, when they used to give money to Canby kids, right?
So, I think Jason and I were on the council at the time. Excuse me, Counselor Patton and I were on the council at the time. The decision was made, I think I was just coming on the council, but to eliminate out of the upcoming budget or just all of the, because all of the community groups like Canby Historical Society, Canby Kids, you name it, we're getting some money allocated to them every year. And so prior to the economic downturn around that time, the decision was made by the council to eliminate doing that out of the next budget piece and roll that funds back into, general fund or, other places where, that money can be used. So, that's how that was.
Yeah, it was essentially a method to try and conserve money so that we weren't like eating our arm. Because the money was going out, that was about the time we started doing some staff cuts and the reserve was being drawn down. And there was ways that the council was trying to reduce that draw on reserve. Now, to Councilor Bangs' point, and I noticed he had his hand raised, maybe now with the amount of reserve we have, it's time that we look at revamping a program like that to start sending some of this reserve back to the community.
So, one question, but I was gonna recommend that we do exactly what you just recommended with 50 grand. But I wanted to ask Eileen, for a town of 18,000, does that seem like the appropriate amount of money to stick in there? Then I would encourage us to do the 50 grand into community grant fund.
I can get behind that.
And then have the council direct staff to put together a mechanism for applying for it.
there's plenty of examples out there in terms of mechanisms to apply for that we can borrow from.
And we do have that grant program that currently exists that we could.
Yeah, Amy, you do.
So the community enhancement grant, we did the pilot project this year. And that grant ended May 12th, and we're working through the asks. We, at that time, put $2,000 for businesses, grants up to $2,000 for businesses, up to $2,000 for nonprofits or not-for-profits, and then $1,000 for HOAs and neighborhood associations as a way to just provide some parameters, and that became before City Council. We are reopening that grant by the end of day tomorrow because we had some asks after, which is actually good news for marketing purposes, meaning that people are talking about that grant. But what I was saying to Mayor Hudson is that because it was a pilot program, the thought was that I would come back to City Council at some point and present how it went, how much money was expended, again, as a marketing aspect for that program and the good work that was supported by the Budget Committee and by the City Council and putting that funding aside. And then at that time, we could talk about maybe it's a certain amount is identified for bigger projects, or maybe we don't put any parameters whatsoever this next time. But the grant process is all in place, so it will be even easier to adjust and move forward.
So Jamie, how much is in that?
50,000.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So it sounds like that program already exists.
Yes.
Well, if that's the case, then does it make sense to just bump that up to $100,000 and then utilize that line and modify that application process? Or do we want to create so that the council can figure out, flush all that detail out? Or do we want to create a community specific, I'm kind of torn about creating a community specific one that wouldn't necessarily be accessible, like make one that's more accessible to businesses where one is more accessible to the community.
Why couldn't we do a 50-50 on that?
That's what he's suggesting.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
I thought you
Go
meant as a
ahead,
whole,
Jamie.
sorry.
One of the things I was gonna say, just obviously this current fiscal year is the pilot program, but one of the things that the previous city administrator and I talked about is doing $50,000 for a business enhancement and then $50,000 for community enhancement. So maybe that would be a way, if you were looking to up that funding, allow for more money for, Canby Kids or whatever nonprofit, that could be a way. Or we could do it with the $50,000 and see what kind of asks we get. I'm excited to get some more direction from council, just because with the first year, it just means that there's opportunities to grow and amend.
Could a very nice old businessman who beautifies the community, could he get some of that money?
Yes.
Do we have
I
such
mean,
people?
Great meeting.
as long as it enhances and enriches
I
the Canby
enhance
community.
everything.
And boy, do I got a deal for you, sir.
Thank you.
Love to talk to
What
you
a
about
great
that.
meeting. Thank you. Any other questions?
So is there an interest in adding to that line item?
Rather than creating a new one.
Right.
My interest would be in creating a second.
Oh, okay.
Mine too,
Okay.
because I think the parameters might be different, and then have council figure out how to do it. And I'd be interested in knowing how much of that money we're spending. So I'm looking forward to Jamie's report to council on that.
Yeah. I know we talked about it before, but it'd be nice, I think right now the cap is 2,000. We talked about, some organizations that maybe do multiple events or much larger events might need more than that, just for their marketing budget. So it'd be nice to have that flexibility to have the option to go higher. So as treasurer of Canby Arts Association, a 501c3, I've gone out and written for grants the last 2 years, and the Regional Arts Cultural Coalition, who gave us $5,000 last year, that was an exception basis. So the limit was 3, but for certain entities that demonstrated a really good impact for their community and, benefiting numerous people could, on a case-by-case basis, be approved for a higher amount, which we were able to obtain. So I just put that out there, someone who will be applying for these grants that we're talking about, it'd be nice to have that flexibility, because that would, for an entity like ours, would cover a big chunk of our budget. That would take a lot of pressure off, so.
Okay. So we will add $50,000 to the budget for a second community grant allocation program. Great. So I'm hearing so far restoring that one line item on mayor and council expenses, 17,000, and then adding this $50,000 line item. Okay. Any other questions on the May 25th memo? Okay, moving to the May 31st memo. So one of the things that I wanted to flash for the committee is that this budget is already increasing 3.5 FTE. But there is an organizational hotspot that I would request that we increase one additional FTE. And that is the position, or recreating the position of deputy city recorder. So the recorder's workload is unsustainable. With all that's required of her on a daily basis, there are tasks, including some state deadlines that she's simply not able to meet. Specifically, ORMS, which is the Oregon Records Management System. All of that information is just basically sitting there, not being attended to at all. We have a new council advisory tracking system that she's not being able to get to. Public records requests, those do get prioritized, but that they are, a drag on her workload. And other special projects that she's just not able to get to. In addition to that, we have administrative support. We don't have administrative support in our administration program. And so adding this position would give us additional capacity in being able to add additional administrative support. So I would request that the council consider, or that the budget committee consider giving me the additional FTE for a deputy city recorder.
Counselor Banks.
Would a deputy city recorder be an AFSCME or an unrepresented position? Just curious.
I don't know yet.
Well, I would support, I would support doing that. I would support the committee funding that.
As well.
Yep.
Approximate amount?
It would be about 128, given salaries and benefits.
Counselor Hensley.
So we're talking about a full FTE doing deputy, is it a hyphenated position or are we talking about one specific position?
What are you driving at?
I think it was pretty clear. Is it a hyphenated position or is it one job? I don't know how to make it more clear than that.
It's one job,
Okay.
Second person.
yeah. I think, yes, it is one position.
Okay.
I could elucidate though, any of our jobs, we put in our job description duties as assigned. So if we found out that the person had some extra time and we had other duties to be done, they could also do other duties.
Right, and I understand extra duties. I'm talking about when the job title says so-and-so / so-and-so.
No, it will be deputy city recorder.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Maya will appreciate it very much.
So do we need to make a motion on that, or is consensus of the committee?
What, you guys sitting here, well, I assume there's consensus. Is there?
Yeah, all the council, I mean,
So then he can add it to the budget, and that'll be the one that we're bringing to the council.
Would it be helpful when whoever makes the motion for it as amended with these?
Yeah.
Okay, just
We'll
making
give
sure
you the
that we get
list
that in there
of,
just for.
items to add.
Counselor Patton.
So I just have some general things that, before we get into any sort of approval or anything, that I've been sort of mulling over as we've been going through this process, and knowing that we can't really necessarily make recommendations to city council, I will just let this body know that as a city councilor, I'm going to be making these recommendations. One of them is for next year. I think we should offer a class to all budget committee members, both citizen and council, but primarily for citizen members, to bring them up to speed on the various projects that the city will have in its budget, in both the past budget and the previous budget. I know as a citizen member but for many years, a lot of times I would get here and I wasn't really sure what these projects were meant for and what their statuses were. And I think this will give the citizen members especially an opportunity to get up to speed on these things. So either they can avoid asking some redundant questions or not feel like they can't ask a question because they worry about dragging down the process. So that is a recommendation that I'm gonna be making up at the city council level, as well as including some training about being a budget committee member and what that entails. Another one that I'm gonna propose is that on January 18th of 2024, we hold our mid-year budget review in a format exactly like this, where it is the city staff and the budget committee as a whole meeting to review do a mid-year review of the entire budget, and request that the packet for that information be sent out to all of the members of the budget committee and staff by January 11th of 2024. Another thing that I will be recommending is that we do a look at adding for next year's budget, looking at adding a grant writer. How much a grant writer would be paid, how much money in grants is out there that they could be bringing into the city, and how much more they could be bringing in over their salary for not this year, but as a budget ask for next year. And then another proposal that I'm going to put forward is that, and Eric and I kind of talked about this just in passing today, but and city council will need to work out the logistics of this with the city administrator, but moving the budget process up by a week to 2 weeks, so that the budget process starts earlier, but these meetings stay at the same time, so that there is a bigger cushion for this body to get the city budget to review it, because I know that there were extenuating circumstances and stuff that will be worked out for next year, but I think if maybe there's some adjustments as to when that process starts, it might give a little bit more of a cushion for that budget to make its way to this body to review it in advance, and maybe catch some of the errors before we actually come to these meetings. Because in the past, there had been an opportunity for members of the committee to submit questions in advance to the finance director to kind of head some of that off at the pass before it got here. And I think that if we gave a little bit more wiggle room in that process, it would allow that to happen. So I think that was. I don't even know what that note
If you can't
says.
read it, it doesn't count.
Yeah, so I won't worry about that one. I'll figure out what that, I said, can we make a recommendation to council to look into the horse and contract? I don't even know what that is.
Hearse?
No.
House?
We're not gonna worry about that one.
Councilman
It'll
Bailey.
hit you at 1
Do
o'clock
we
tonight.
have a horse?
No, we don't. We don't have a dog, let alone a horse.
In regards to meeting in January for a mid-review for that, Eric, will we have our audit back in normal circumstances in time for that?
My plan next year is to get it done by December 31st. I've already talked to the auditors, so.
Okay, because it would make sense to have that information before we have a mid-year review.
Yeah.
And I understand the delay last year, but we should be on more even footing now.
Yeah, they're coming next month.
Eric, in the agenda, where there's the motion to approve the budget, could you help us fill in that blank?
I think it's got the
Yeah.
blank.
It is 86,263,075, so 075. So 86,263,075.
Just make a comment on that number, and Jason, I think you could probably lament as well that we were on the council when that number, I think, was in the 30 million
Yeah.
area. So,
50 million.
tells you how much, one, we've grown as a city, but also with that growth, the cost of providing services and to maintain those services that we provide. It is not cheap to do. The price and costs are going up astronomically, to the point Councilor Bangs brought up about our reserve funds was we went through a number of years where we were eating through, as a friend of mine called it, our seed corn, and we got into, I think, single digits on our reserves. It was a concern, and it did lead to layoffs, and some extreme reorganization pieces that we had to do, and that was not fun, being on the council at the time, having to do those things. So, and I know it wasn't fun for the interim administrator at the time as well. So, I would not like to see that happen again. So, my point being is, was we look at this $86 million to operate 3 square miles, is pretty amazing. And when you look at what we've accomplished in this number, our city staff and our citizens should be pleased with what we have done. Is there more to do? Absolutely. And we will look at getting those things done and keep Canby doing what it's doing. But there's a lot of work that goes into creating this budget, and there's a lot of work that goes into spending this budget and spending it appropriately. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Councilor Davis.
I believe Jason is first.
Yeah, I just want to say something, and for several years, I have noticed this in the budget, and I've always been reluctant to say anything about it to the group, but this year, it comes to mind as Chief Tro was here talking about bringing on new officers and stuff. I think something that and trust me, I am all for supporting the Canby Police. But something we need to be cognizant of is that the police department uses over 60, almost 70%, between 65 and 70% of the city's budget. All the other departments function within that very small piece of the pie. And every year, that piece of pie gets bigger. And so we really, I think as a city, need to do some thinking about how we're gonna deal with this, because I doubt that Chief Tro is gonna want his people to be sent off to help Jerry fill potholes and clean out sewer lines and help Jamie coordinate events and help Kat drive buses and so on and so forth. So we're gonna have to, I think that is something that we are going to need to start being cognizant of as far as our funding goes. And still be able to bring on the extra officers that the chief is asking for to bring that FTE up to 3 officers per shift per department or whatever that ask is. So that's just something that's been on my mind for several years.
I guess my question is, did we cover all the parking lot items?
That's my question too.
I mean, there's still a number of things on here that haven't been talked about, but I know
Right.
some of these are number corrections and things like that, but I just wanted to make sure
Yes. Are there any
the
other
budget committee was comfortable with, did we cover off the items that we needed to cover off?
We talked a long time about the Canby Community Park.
Well, we already voted on the
Problem.
URA budget too.
Is it, I mean, are you comfortable with that, or? I mean, I bet we talked 40 minutes on that.
We met today,
Okay.
I'll let I.
Yeah, there's next week in the council, the urban renewal district is meeting to just continue that discussion.
Okay.
I think the question last week though was the check sent or not? It was, apparently, we were told a check was sent, but then there was question.
Yeah.
He's got a finger up. Eric's like,
I got
"I got a finger."
answers.
I'll let Eric
No,
answer.
so I did see the 767 or whatever the amount was, but it was actually the documentation for writing the purchase order.
Yeah.
So we've got the purchase order written, and did you say they started today?
They're gonna start tomorrow morning at 7 AM. They're just moved in today.
Yeah, so we haven't cut any checks, they haven't submitted any, requests, invoices for payment.
So the situation of one entity reimbursing another doesn't exist that we talked about last week.
That's correct.
That's
Right
not,
now, the way the budget is adopted is that the URA is responsible for paying for the park. But if the meeting that the URD has later this week changes that, then the city and the URD could both be paying the invoice.
Okay.
We're good,
Okay.
Scott, on
Okay.
that, just on ours.
Okay. Anybody else on the second parking lot?
Ready for a motion?
So
Ready for
we
a
will
moment?
have an amendment of 3 figures to that. It'll still be the 86 million in that blank.
You could probably just say as amended, or no?
I
Does it need
just
be
wanted to
called out
make sure that we have those 3 amendments captured in the motion.
Were those 3 in that
So,
number, were those 3 in that number, that $86 million number? or will
Yeah,
that
they're
be-
already there. It's just a matter of moving money around. Yeah. So.
Okay, I move that the budget committee of the city of Canby approve the budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal year in the amount of
$86,263,75.
Thank you, I agree with that. To levy property tax for the 2023-2024 fiscal year in the amount of 3.4886 per 1,000 assessed valuation for operating purposes and 0.49 per 1,000 assessed valuation for the swim center local option levy.
Second.
With the following
With
amendments.
with the following amendments.
So we will restore the mayor and council program budget to 17,370. We will add a line item for community grants of $50,000. And we will work into the public, to personal services in the administration program, $128,000 for the deputy city recorder.
Thank you. I concur with all three of those.
So motion by Counselor Davis, seconded by Counselor Barwick. All those in favor?
Any other discussion?
No discussion. No discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. It says in-house versus contract. It's the IT thing.
Comment?
Cover that.
I just wanted to thank all the department heads and the department heads that are not here for the job you guys did in providing the information to Eric, and to Eric for a good job in putting together the document, and especially the revised documents, and to Eileen too, for picking up on this in a short period of time and doing an outstanding job.
Thank you. Thank you on behalf of staff.
Okay, thank you for everybody showing up. We are adjourned.